This is a short documentary that I've made for my dad's birthday of when myself, Nate Glover and my dad, Sean Glover, did the Land's End to John O Groats bike ride from the 22nd of May to the 2nd of June. We did 10 days of biking. First off, we prepared our bikes by taking minimal kit so as to reduce the amount of weight that we had on the bike. We also only took kit for 5 days because we were planning on meeting our partners halfway through the journey to swap out our old kit for new clean kit. The first day, the 22nd of May, was all about travel. We had to be at the train station for 3:15 in the morning. We met up at Peterborough train station and got our bikes on the train to make our journey from Peterborough to King's Cross. We got into King's Cross at 5 a.m. Then it was a short bike ride through the streets of London to Paddington Station, where we'd get our connecting train. We arrived at Paddington at 5:20 in the morning. We waited for our train to arrive, and when it did, we got our bikes into the stowage and found our seats, leaving for 6 a.m. We had a couple of beers on the way down to Penzance because we had 9 hours on the train to kill. However, it didn't feel like 9 hours because it was a lovely day and there was lots of nice scenery as we made our way down the Cornish coastline. We got to Penzance at about 11:45 and made our way down the promenade towards our final destination of Sennen. We had a 10-mile journey to Sennen, which would take us about an hour. We were there by 1 o'clock. It was a decent route into Sennen and went past lots of nice architecture. As you can see, we're not very far from Land's End, which would be our starting point the next day. Our first stop was in the First and Last Inn, where we enjoyed a pint of the First and Last lager in the beer garden in the sun, where we got chatting to a Canadian and were talking about our bike ride planned for this week. Our conversation kept on getting interrupted though by this helicopter that was going back and forth every 10 minutes. At 3:30 we decided to take a ride down to Land's End to see how far it was from where we were staying and also to see where we needed to go for the next day. We found the official sign for Land's End to John O Groats. We took a couple of pictures of the bikes and then enjoyed the scenery for a little bit. We also hadn't realised that where we were having a drink a few hours earlier in the First and Last Inn, right next to it was where we were staying for the night. It was a great location, right next to the pub and only 15 minutes away from Land's End. The room itself was perfect, there was plenty of room for the bikes, a decent bed, a decent shower and plenty of teas and coffees. We were getting a bit hungry, so at 5:30 we took a short bike ride down to Sennen Cove, where we found a place for fish and chips. It also gave me an opportunity to find a decent stone, as one of my traditions is to take a stone at the start and then to throw it in the sea at the end of the journey. Day 2, the 23rd of May. It was our first day of riding and we had 90 miles to cover. Our first destination was Launceston. We started at 7:15 and was at Land's End for 7 a.m. We took a couple of pictures with the Land's End to John O Groats sign, but we couldn't hang around for long because we had lots of miles to cover that day. We had nearly 1,000 miles to cover over the next 10 days. It was a lovely sunny morning, so we decided to get on our way. Just after 7 a.m, we crossed the start line and began our journey. By 8 a.m, we were back in Penzance, cycling down the coastal pass past St Michael's Mount. We went past a lot of ruins of old Cornish mines, we went through Redruth and Blackwater, and our first stop was at Sir Newlyn East, a village shop. We were there by 11:30, where we got something to eat and replenished our water bottles. 46 miles in and the weather was beautiful, but then we hit a few hills. The route was very picturesque. We went past an abandoned railway, we saw some wild horses, and we even performed a rescue by putting a lamb that we found on the road back into the field to find its mother. Next, we cycled through the Bodmin Moors and an old abandoned World War II airfield, Davidstow Airfield. 84 miles in, and we'd nearly made it to our B&B for the night. The host couldn't have been more accommodating. They'd made us baked potatoes for the night and helped us with our bikes. By 6:30 we were on the sofa with a beer. We'd covered a lot of miles that day. You'd think we'd be tired, but unfortunately we didn't get a great night's sleep, which didn't prepare us very well for the next day. Day 3, the 24th of May, and our second day of riding. We had 109 miles to cover today to Glastonbury. We were up by 5 AM, out by 6 AM, and in Devon for 7 AM. We had a bit of rain that morning, but nothing too bad as we rode around the Dartmoor National Park. Over 24 miles later, and we made our way to Exeter. Exeter was a beautiful city, lots of lovely architecture, and lucky for us they had a market on where I could buy a cookie as big as my head. It also gave us an opportunity to have a look at our navigation and see how far we had left to go. We were in Glastonbury by 5 PM, and half an hour later we arrived in Wells, which is where we were staying for the night. Leaving our bikes at the hotel, we walked to the Quarterjack, the local Wetherspoons, where we can have something to eat and a beer. We also had a bit of entertainment with the Hot Fuzz Stag Do going on that night as well. After another disappointing night's sleep, it was day 4, the 25th of May, and our third day of riding. We had 80 miles to cover today to Hereford. It was another lovely sunny morning, but we came up against one of the steepest hills that we had encountered so far. There was a lovely view at the top though, and it didn't slow us down too much because by 11 AM we were in Bristol. We got to see the Clifton Suspension Bridge, and later we got to cycle underneath it. We even got to see the Clifton Rocks Railway, carved into the side of the rock face. At 12:30 we've made our way to the Severn Bridge. It was very long, very windy, and took us a while to get across. When we did finally get across to Chepstow, we were making good progress. That was until my dad hit a pothole and broke one of the spokes on his wheel. However, there wasn't much we could do, so we made a makeshift repair with some tape and carried on our journey. By 6:30 we'd made our way into the centre of Hereford. We left our bikes at the hotel and then went to the King's Fee to have a curry and a beer. Day 5 and our 4th day of cycling. It was the 26th of May and we had 85 miles to cover today to Nantwich. We'd started at 6:45 and we absolutely flew through the small villages to Shrewsbury, arriving at our destination at 2 PM. We had enough time to stop for a cup of coffee and try and get the spoke repaired, and we even beat our other halves to the hotel. That evening, all 4 of us went out for a meal at the George Inn, but stupidly we forgot to charge our power banks for the next day. Day 6 and the 5th day of biking, the 27th of May, was our halfway point and one of our toughest days for sure. Our route took us down a gravel canal trail which was very bumpy, overgrown and slow, but as soon as we got back onto the tarmac we started making good progress again. However, disaster struck just outside of Wigan. It started raining, our phones died and we had no battery chargers. We stopped at a McDonald's to recharge, and then finally when we had enough power got back on our way through Chorley, Preston and Lancaster. Our mistake had delayed us by nearly 2 hours and we were only just getting into Kendal at 8:15 that evening. When we got to the hotel I must have spent about 20 minutes in the shower trying to warm up, and then we went out for a meal at the Miles Thompson in Kendal Centre. Unfortunately, another bad night's sleep, where I got absolutely no REM at all. The next day, day 7, and our 6th day of cycling, it was the 28th of May and we'd learnt our lesson. We'd made sure that our phones and our power banks were charged, and we had 98 miles to cover today to the next destination of Moffat. However, we did make another mistake. We went the wrong way and ended up in a sheep's field. It did give us a chance though to check out the Crumb Bakery in Staveley. We stopped for a coffee and a pastry and then got back on our bikes and made our way to Windermere. We were in Windermere by 11 AM. It was very sunny and there were a lot of hills. I may have had a little bit of a tantrum and thrown my bike into a ditch. But when we got into Penrith, we stopped at a McDonald's. I had something to eat and I felt a lot better. We made it into Carlisle for 4 PM, and before we knew it, we'd crossed over the Scottish border. We went through Gretna Green and Lockerbie, and we got into Moffat about 6:30 in the evening. The B&B was hosted by a Geordie bloke who even made us breakfast for the next day. We went out for fish and chips and Dad got talking to some of the other guests. Day 8 and our 7th day of riding, the 29th of May, we had 100 miles to cover today to our next destination of Perth. We'd started at 7:30 that morning. It was dark, rainy and there were a lot of hills. We didn't cross the Forth until 3 PM, but by 4 PM the sun had come out. The Scottish scenery was beautiful, but we were being slowed down a lot by the constant change in weather. It felt like we were having to stop every 15 minutes to take our waterproofs on and off. There were some decent downhill sections though, where we hit speeds of nearly 40 miles an hour. We got into Perth at 6:30 that evening, made our way to the hotel, parked our bikes and then walked through the streets to the local Wetherspoons, the capital asset. We had a beer and a meal, but who in their right mind has mango chutney with fish and chips? As you can see, we're well north of Edinburgh now, and the next day we made an early start on the road by 7:30. It was the 30th of May, day 9, and our 8th day on the road. Our next destination was Granton-on-Spey, over 100 miles away. We'd chosen to ignore cycle routes and were sticking to B and A roads. We were making good progress this way, but we had to stop occasionally to take our waterproofs on and off. Our first stop that day wasn't until 11:30, where we stopped to have some lunch by a local shopping centre and share it with some birds. Our ride was very scenic, our bikes were holding up well and so were we. It was also nice to know that our waterproofs were working, as none of our kit had gotten wet over the frequent downpours we'd been caught in. It wasn't long before we'd arrived in the Scottish Highlands. I'd started making plans of where we'd stop throughout the day, and at 2 PM in Dalwhinnie we stopped for a coffee and a sandwich at the Priory. We were on schedule for arriving at Granton-on-Spey for 6:30. We rode around the Cairngorms National Park, through Aviemore, past the Roof End Barracks and some Highland cows. When we got into Granton-on-Spey, we found our B&B and went out to get some takeaway. I also grabbed a can of Iron Brew because we're in Scotland. Day 10, the 31st of May, it was our 9th day of riding and we had 85 miles to cover today to Lejog. Starting again at 7:30, we got to Carbridge, the home of the World Porridge Championships and the Golden Spurtle. Rode past the Cool Bridge over the River Dolnain, and then cycled up another really big hill. We then got into Inverness at 11:30 and cycled over the Keswick Bridge. The weather was kind to us today. It was quite sunny and it wasn't too windy as we crossed the River Ness. It didn't take us long to cross the Inverness Firth into North Keswick. From there we followed the A9 up towards Dingwall. 55 miles in and we'd nearly made it to Alness, getting there for 2 PM. We stopped at a Harry Gow bakery for a pastry and a cup of tea. Whilst we were there we got chatting to another couple of bikers that were also doing the Land's End to John O Groats cycle ride. They'd camped for part of their journey, having to take all of their camping equipment with them. We got into our stay for the night at 5 p.m. It was a bit run down, but it was still a lot better than having to camp in a tent. The decor was like taking a step back in time. But at least there was a hot bath, you just couldn't drink any of the water. We hadn't thought about food for that evening, and there wasn't any pubs within 20 miles. So we rationed out what food we had and got an early night. The next day was day 11, day 10 for us on the road, and our last day, the 1st of June. Our destination, John O Groats, and we had 90 miles to cover. We were up by 4 a.m. and out the doors by 20 past 5. Our first stop was Brora, some 40 miles in. We stopped at a co-op at 8 a.m, where I ate my body weight in sausage rolls and shortbread, trying to make up for our lack of food the night before. At 9 a.m. we went through Hemsdale, at 10 a.m. we went through Berrydale. We followed the A9 through Wick, and by 2 p.m. we'd reached our goal, John O Groats. We'd covered just under 1,000 miles, and we were cold, tired and windswept. But we both felt very accomplished, and we took shelter in the John O Groats cafe to warm up. After reflecting on our journey over a hot cup of tea, I had one thing left to do. And that for me symbolised the end of a challenging 10 days. But we still had a 10-mile ride back to our accommodation, a shepherd's hut, for the night. Day 12, the 2nd of June, was another 4 a.m. start and a beautiful sunrise back to Wick Station. By 6 a.m. we were on the train back to Edinburgh with a hot cup of tea in hand. We came back through a lot of the villages that we had cycled through the day before. It was amazing to see just how far we'd cycled. At 2:30 we got our connecting train from Edinburgh back to Peterborough. It had been an amazing experience, but I think we were both happy to get home. Anyway, thanks for watching, I hope you enjoyed it, and I'm looking forward to our next adventure.